of the Budget and Finance Commission for August 12th, 2021. The first thing I'd like to do is to officially recognize and welcome our new Director of Finance, Jennifer Paul. And with that, Jennifer, can you please conduct a roll call?
Actually, sorry, Jason, this is Doug Hawkins. I'll do the roll call tonight.
Okay, that's fine.
Commissioner Solomon?
You're muted, Eugene.
I am here though.
You are here.
Thank you. Commissioner Samples?
I'm here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Woodham?
Commissioner Woodham let me know that he would likely not be able to attend tonight's meeting.
Okay. So, Chairman Conroy?
Here.
Commissioner Marin will also be absent tonight, and Commissioner Wynn notified us that he'll be joining a little later.
Okay. So, okay. Well, we still have a quorum.
Still have a quorum. 4 is a quorum.
Yes. All right. With that, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. All right. So that brings us to item D, approval of the order of agenda. Would anyone like to change the order of agenda? Seeing as we have guests this evening, I propose or suggest that we move item J2 and J3 up. Is there any preference as to whether we start with J2 or J3 based on schedules?
Commissioner, may I just submit to you that Stephen Glicksman is calling in from Florida
Okay.
at 9:30 p.m. where he is. I'm not totally sure what item number he is, but he's working very late.
Mr. Glicksman, we appreciate you here this evening. Which item are you speaking to?
J1.
J1.
To J1. Well, in that case, we won't make any changes to, well, I propose we don't make any changes to the order of agenda, since we have speakers for each item. Other commissioners, are there any other proposed changes? Seeing none, may I get a motion to approve the order of agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson, and a second.
Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Let's see, who have we here? Commissioner Samples.
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. Thank you. All right, moving on to item D, blue folder items. Okay, I see we have a blue folder item tonight. Jennifer, can you describe that blue folder item for us?
Certainly, Eugene Solomon had requested this. Nobody here tonight is actually prepared to report on this. This is an old report done back in 2019 and presented to this commission on July 11th or 12th of that year. It's just an internal rough study done. And the conclusion was to go ahead with the actuarial study that we will hear from Stephen Glicksman on tonight.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, great. Is there a motion to admit this blue folder item to the record?
So moved.
Second.
Second, okay. Are there any objections to admitting this item? Okay, seeing none, so ordered. Item F, that brings us to our consent calendar. There's 2 items on our consent calendar this evening. These will be approved in one motion. Would any member of the commission like to pull either item for discussion? Okay. Do we have any public comments on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, can we have a motion to approve items F1 and F2?
A motion to approve consent calendar items F1 and F2.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. Seeing a motion in a second, we'll do a roll call vote, beginning with Commissioner Samples,
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Thank you. And chair votes aye as well. Consent calendar items are now received and filed. All right, we don't have any excluded consent calendar items, so we'll move on to item H, public participation on non-agenda items. The section is intended to provide members of the public with the opportunity to comment on any subject that does not appear on the agenda for action. The section is limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker, including those by Zoom, will be afforded 3 minutes to address the commission. Each speaker will be permitted to speak only once. Written requests, including email comments, if any, will be considered first under this section. Do we have any public participation of non-agenda items tonight?
I don't believe so. I checked the attendees. Doug is looking electronically, and I don't think we've heard.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, there's correct. There's no callers calling in, and there's no e-comments.
Perfect. Okay. With that, moving on to item I. Next on our agenda are items continued from previous agendas. Would any commissioners present like to recall any items from previous agendas for discussion at this time? Okay. Seeing none, then we will move on to item J. Starting with item J1, discussion of prepared actuarial study of the workers' compensation fire department only self-insurance program, presented by Jennifer Paul and Mr. Glicksman. Take it away.
Hi there. Actually, Diane has worked quite a bit with Stephen Glicksman, and so I think she might want to introduce him, but I know he's got an exciting study for us. I look forward to it.
You know,
Actuarial
might not be the
studies.
right word.
Actuarials are always very exciting.
Always.
So good evening, commissioners. About a year and a half ago, the commission heard from Stephen Glicksman and regarding our full city workers' compensation program and actuarial study that he produces for us each year. And then at that meeting, they requested that the city council approve funding for an actuarial study just of the fire department. Council approved that funding and he completed the work, and he is here tonight to present his actuarial findings regarding the fire department workers' compensation program based on data that's current and I think ending fiscal year June 30th, 2021. So Stephen, take it away.
Are you ready for me, really?
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Does everybody have a copy of the report? Okay. I'm assuming everybody has it on computers so that I can go to PDF pages?
We all have it. Stephen, if you don't mind, I'd like to just give Commissioner Solomon a minute to speak as to why he recalled this item and requested that it be discussed this evening, and then we'll turn the gavel back over to you.
Sure thing.
The reason that I asked for the blue folder item that was included, Chair,
Yes.
the reason I asked for that was it was the genesis of the original request for Mr. Glicksman's work from the city council to us, a discussion at city council based on that report. It was part of a broader discussion as to whether we would retain our firefighter services in examining a feasibility study for county services. And this was the staff's response to the feasibility study, the expenses and benefits and burdens that were displayed by the county feasibility study. Since we went and got Mr. Glicksman's report about a year and a half ago, and I think it was October of 19. And then we had this report coming up, which was specific to the fire department. I thought that perhaps one of the commissioners might bring it up, or members of the public might like to see it as part of a recall of the information that was presented, and for transparency and for recall to have it available for all of us.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, Mr. Glicksman.
Okay, and you know, I know people in the room probably, can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yes.
You know, everyone has sort of different levels of sophistication. So I'm going to pick something that I think is in the center. But if I go too fast for some, I'll slow it down. Too slow for others, I'll speed it up. But I'll try and get you through it. So, and I'm not going to be wordy either. So let's go to page 6 of the PDF, please. And let me know when you're there. And I have another computer that I'm looking at, actually. So if you see my eyes not looking at you, I don't have autism or anything like that. Well, I might have it, but not that it's bad to have it, but I might have it, but I'm looking at another computer. Okay, so let me know when you're at PDF 6.
Is that the one with the header effects Volusia County Fire?
It says, well, are you asking me for the report, or are you asking me for the page?
Well, I'm on the blue folder item. I'm probably in the wrong spot. I need to go to item J1 in here.
The answer is I don't know.
It's the actuarial study in the packet that was delivered.
Okay, thank you.
Packet. And page 6 is the first exhibit. I think it says summary at the top and it has a chart.
The report is dated July 27th.
Okay.
Would
Let
it
me
be
know when you're there.
if I shared my screen with it?
Sure.
That'd be great.
I mean, it's up to you. You're probably a lot more sophisticated than me. There you go. Perfect.
Thank you. That's perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer.
My pleasure.
Okay. So it looks like a whole bunch of numbers, but after I walk through it, it's really all not that complicated. If you look across the top row where it says outstanding losses, this means that if let's say you decided you didn't want the fire department anymore for whatever reason, this would be how much the face value of the checks that you would owe the injured firefighters. So, for example, if you look in the column 2, it says $7,143,000. So, if you decided that on that date back in March, if you decided, we're not going to ever have another firefighter again, that would be the amount of money that you need to pay your existing firefighters for their existing claims. So if a claim happened on March 30th, it's in there. If a March happened on April 1st, it's not. Does everybody follow me?
And that's the value of the claims throughout what's estimated throughout the claim period?
Is that who's speaking, please?
Eugene? Sorry.
So I'm sorry, say it again, please.
Is when you have the estimated outstanding losses, it's through June of 2025 on the far right-hand column.
Because what I do is I calculate it it's a long-term estimate. So each one of those are a point in time. So you owed 7,143, and then if you keep the program till June 30th, which of course passed, you know, 7,128. And you can see that if you kept the program until, I mean, every year what's happening is you're getting new claims and you're paying off old claims.
So this is the estimated value at that date in time, 3/31/21 as an example. And whether in 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, if we cut off the claims at that point, that would be the estimated value of all claims.
That is what
Does that include the loss adjustment?
Yes, it does. That's what you owe.
Including the loss adjustment expense.
The whole shebang. And it's undiscounted.
Okay, thank you.
I understand the paying off old claims.
Actually,
How are we bringing on new claims?
I'm sorry, sir. It doesn't include the 4850.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Glexman, I understood the paying off old claims, but why are we bringing on new claims under this scenario? I thought we didn't have a city fire department under this.
I can answer that.
Okay.
So basically, if you're a firefighter or a police officer, you can file a claim up to 10 years after you leave employ.
Well, I'm sorry, Diane. I'm a little confused because I didn't know that you'd gotten rid of your fire department.
We were hypothetically saying if we closed the business today,
Oh, I see. Okay.
you could still get claims.
Well, you could, but that's not what this is about. This is assuming you keep it.
This is assuming we
Understood.
keep it. Okay, good to know.
Okay. Any other questions?
I see no hands raised.
And please, okay, stop me at any point. So everything I'm doing is assuming that nothing changes, that you keep them.
Understood.
But of course, if let's say, I'm just making this up. Let's say that you decided today you didn't want firefighters. Of course, anything after the June 30, 21 date is going to be different, right? Because you're not going to get new claims, you're just paying off old claims. Now, if you look at the center row, it says ultimate limited losses. What that really means is the cost of claims in that period. So for example, in the period we're now, the 21-22 year, the new workers' comp claims you're going to get are going to be about 1,351,000. So if a firefighter is hurt between July 1, 21 and June 30th, 22, that's the value of the claims. It doesn't mean you're going to pay them then. It just means eventually that's what it's going to cost you. It's going to be the face value of all the checks you write for a person hurt during that period. Stop me if it doesn't include 4850. Nothing includes 4850.
So, can you just spend 10 seconds explain what a 4850 is? Sure.
Well, under California labor code, it's a safety personnel, which is simply police and fire. Let's say this California has a maximum on how much money you can collect for workers' comp. And it's usually, 2/3 of a person's wage up into a set amount. I forget what the set amount is, but let's say $1,000. So for example, if you earn $1,500 a week, under California comp code, you can get up to $1,000, 2/3. Now, the way that the California code reads is that for up to 1 year, that amount is supplemented up to full salary. So what that means is a firefighter that's hurt doesn't get $1,000, he or she actually gets $1,500. So the 4850 is the difference between the 1,000 and the 1,500.
Thank you, that helps.
Yeah, are you okay with that? It's kind of the quick definition.
I think I have a better understanding now, yes.
Yeah, I don't want to go too fast, but if I go too slow, I'll just make everybody yawn. Okay. So the bottom row is how much is the cash out the door. So if you're just sort of looking at this, and I'm looking down old column 2s, okay? If you owed 7143 on March 31st, for the rest of the quarter year, you're taking out another 329, and then you're paying out 334. If you look in column 3, you see the 7128, it went down by 15,000. Why? Because you paid out claims a little faster than you took on new ones. And you can see that's a pretty level number across the years. So roughly speaking, you're at parity. You're taking on new claims and paying off old claims. You know, you're taking on a few more new claims than old claims, but it's not a big increase. Okay.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Glicksman, this is Nelson.
Please call me Stephen. I feel like I'm an old man.
Okay, Stephen, if you extended beyond 2025, based on the trend that you're looking at, would you expect it to remain relatively flat, or can you reasonably expect large variances either above or below this number?
Well, you know, this is all a guesstimate, right?
Right.
Okay, I mean, you know, that joke about an actuary where they're hunting for rabbits. They got 2 actuaries and one sheet's 10 feet in front and one 10 feet behind, and he goes, got him.
Right.
So, it's really, you know, this is more of an estimate as a guide rather than something I think you ought to take. You know, even though I listed to the dollar, that really indicates a position that's not here.
It's an infinite number of incorrect projections.
Yeah.
Say again, sir?
It's an infinite number of incorrect projections.
It is.
Yeah.
But, I think it's a good estimate, but it's a lot like estimating everybody's height, right? You bring 10 people in a room and maybe the average height is 5'9" or 5'10". I don't know. You know, I might say 5'9", but if it's 5'10". So, but this is really.
If I can interrupt,
No, I think this is
go
ahead, sir.
I see a hand raised by Commissioner Solomon. I just don't want to get you too far ahead before this question relates to this page.
Were you asking me to hold off?
Well, no, I want to recognize Commissioner Solomon. He had his hand
Okay, go
up.
ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Conroy. Stephen, when you're reviewing the data for these projections, this is data that was accumulated citywide or specific claims experience for the fire department?
Well, that's actually a pretty good question, because what I'm doing is I'm using the assumptions I used for the city as a whole, but applying it to fire department data only.
Okay, so calling back then a remark that Diane made a moment ago, where you've got fire safety people, our safety personnel have presumptive injury. So our loss experience with presumptive injury might be higher than a loss experience for another employee in the city who's performing a different task. And then the incurred but not reported, the IBNR number because of presumptive injury might be higher, or our experience might be lower. It depends on how many legacy employees we have long-term that have declared presumptive injury, or if we're assuming, and this is a question for Diane, employees that are safety personnel that we inherited from a different agency, and whether or not we would then, how that presumptive injury is allocated when claimed by that eligible personnel.
Is that a question or?
Well, it's pondering with regard to the numbers.
Well,
do you think it would look different?
Let me answer it I'm probably going to answer the question differently than I mean, I'm getting from this you're pretty knowledgeable, but I'm probably going to answer the question a little bit differently than maybe you anticipate.
Okay.
I think I've got the average pretty well. And yeah, police and fire are more expensive than I don't know, maintenance work. I mean, police and fire, when it comes to claims, they're kind of awful. Police are much worse than fire, by the way. And that's a cultural thing I find in a lot of places. The police, for better or worse, they kind of use the workers' comp as pre-retirement in a lot of places.
Yes, they do.
So I think I've got the average pretty well, but I'm going to skip later on to the report to show you something that I think will really get to your question better. And that's going to be page, that's going to be to PDF 16. Thank you, Jennifer. Now, I'm going to bring your attention to column 9, which is sort of off to the right. So this is what I'm getting for projections by year for the fire department only. Now you can see the last couple of years have been in the mid 500s, 400, but every now and then, or more than every now and then, you have a really awful year. And the reason I'm bringing this up is even though I may have the average right at about 1.3 million, I think that's where it came out, it varies a lot by year. So, the problem is, it's not a really easy thing to project. You could have a year of 2 million followed by a year of 300,000 or 600,000. And there's no way to predict which year will happen ahead of time.
If those are our averages for the fire department right there, projected losses like that, average them out would include an average out for what would be the mixture of presumptive and non-presumptive injury averaged out over that.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
But I don't know whether or not it's 10% or 20%. I don't know. Presumptive injuries are a problem, right? Someone gets cancer, somebody has a heart attack, and you're going to pay a lot of money for it. And there's no way to predict ahead because frankly, you can get a claim 5 and 10 years later.
So Diane, when we bring on an employee from a different agency, let's say we hire somebody onto our police department that had worked at a different police department, a county police department, or LAPD, and they make a claim that's related to a presumptive injury claim. Is there a statutory way of divvying that up between the agencies, or do we assume the obligation only for the period of time they've been with us?
It's actually a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't know whether or not, the problem is going to be you don't know what the year of the injury was.
Right.
It depends on the injury and how long they were at the previous employer versus here. We did have a police officer that came from Hawthorne, nobody that works here now, and worked there for like 10 years, came here, worked for 2 years, had back problems, and then went out on an IDR, and they apportioned, I want to say the attorneys actually stipulated to this in front of the workers' comp board, like 60% Hawthorne, 40% to us. It didn't seem to me like it should be 60-40. It seemed like 80-20, but that's how it worked out.
Dan, who makes that ruling?
They have an agreed medical examiner, I think, that
Got it.
on that. And
Oh, wow. They do an IME and knock it out that way.
Yes.
Okay.
So actually, I'm gonna sort of take one step more onto your question, and that would be, let's say you terminate the fire department, and you go to the county, and then someone makes a claim next year for presumptive illness. I think I'm going to where you're going on this, is that you don't know, you still may get dinged for it.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, so that's a calculation it's an unknown. It's a CapEx of the component. There's no way to factor it on with your numbers. I just want to see how it would be treated and to see it by and it's interesting to note Diane's remark there that it's some sort of a mediation process, or it ended up being a mediation process as to how those expenses were allocated between agencies.
I never really, it's never been something that came up, because for me personally, so I have to tell you, I don't know the answer. But
no, I think we got some pretty good information on it though. So
okay.
Thank you for that.
Okay. I'm trying to think through your numbers, the meaning of your question a little more carefully. And to the extent that that's happened in the past, these numbers reflect them.
Right.
But if you're going to have a paradigm change where you give the whole thing to the county, obviously these numbers don't reflect them. However, I probably can look through the claims and figure out which are presumptive and which aren't.
Right. Well, you have a situation where we carterize our non-presumptive injuries at one date, at X date, and then we don't have no new claims. So we can go ahead and calculate what that's going to save us. And we can calculate going forward. In the past, we know what our presumptive injury claims are and what a calculation would be for the expense of that going forward based on that person's age and injury and current benefits. But what we don't know and can't calculate for is a claim that occurs after an agency change, a presumed agency change, what those expenses that might come back to us might be. We can project based on the numbers you have here and try and figure out what amongst these are presumptive versus non-presumptive. But you would factor an estimate of A to B as far as an analysis would go. And that's really what I'm trying to figure out as a way of helping out what numbers might look like.
Well, a couple of things I'm going to add to that, and I get your point. Listen, I certainly don't care what you do either way. Okay, I want to make sure that comes across. I'm not. I mean, if you do it,
the numbers determine it. I don't.
Yeah, and not only that, but really, I mean, it's like for me, it's just a number. But a couple of things I would think. One is, it seems to me that if you were to do that, it's something you should pre-negotiate. I mean, the last thing you want to do is find out, have an ICRMA situation in the fire department, right? You don't want that. Because the only person that's going to get rich on that is going to be me and the lawyer. And the other thing is, I can tell you that as time goes on, your concern is going to become less and less important. I mean, I think in the first 3 or 4 years, it's definitely important. But then as time goes on, whatever is going to happen that's going to be history.
Thank you very much.
Is that okay?
I'll step aside.
No, it's intellectually stimulating, and I encourage you to ask me.
So,
Yeah, well, I don't want to bore everybody.
You guys can meet up after the meeting and discuss it.
Yeah, you're not boring me, and I like it actually.
Okay.
Stephen, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. I thought you said that safety personnel for like a heart attack or cancer, that they could file a workers' comp claim for that. Is that correct?
Of course.
Okay. And
if I not just file it, it's a presumed illness. Meaning, usually for comp, you have to demonstrate that it was work related. Like somebody can't say they have a bad back and just make a claim. They have to say, I got the bad back from lifting stuff on the job. But for cancer claims and heart attack, they don't have to do that. They just have to have it, and it's your fault.
Okay. I thought I'd heard that before in another meeting, and I just wanted to get a confirmation from you. Okay.
Yeah, that's written into the labor code, all of the diseases and conditions that are presumptive. Like for police officers, the duty belt. So any kind of low back problems is presumptively the workplace's fault. For fire, it's any heart condition,
Heart condition is brought on by the job.
Yeah. Even like stress, sleep disorders, a lot of
they could be 500 pounds eating yodels, and it's your fault.
Okay, I guess that's through collective bargaining. I don't know how the city can't somehow defend itself against certain things like that, but okay.
It's in the labor
code. It was done by the legislator, and that's it.
I think I even heard if police officers put gasoline in their own car, that found they're open to cancer or different types of things. All right.
You did.
Yeah, I did hear that correctly. All right. That's all I had. Moving on to Commissioner Samples, I have a question for you as well.
So two things. First of all, if I heard you correctly, as time goes on, if for some reason the fire department were not direct city employees, our risk exposure would go down both in presumptive injuries and direct injuries. So these numbers would decrease at some rate that at this point is not predictable, but it's reasonable to expect the numbers would go down.
Well, what I'm saying is that the non-presumptive injuries will go away 100%.
Okay.
On the day you transfer. The presumptive illnesses, I don't know I'll be honest, I don't know the pattern, and then there's a lot of variance over who has them and how it's negotiated. For example, if you negotiate that the county takes on all presumptive illnesses, that's what happens. It's zero. If the county says no, then it goes to a mediator. You're in a place that I certainly can't predict, and I don't know anyone could.
Okay, that was.
But if you were to do it, I would recommend that you get it codified as to what happens. And honestly, I'm not taking a side. I don't care what you do.
Fair enough.
In the nicest way.
Just
another one. Okay, people talk about the glass being half empty or half full. And I just think the glass is too big.
Just trying to be clear on what you're saying. So the other part of this, and you just touched on it again, which is negotiating the responsibility for those presumptive injuries. Is that something that's reasonable and commonly done, or would that be out of the ordinary?
I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
But out of the ordinary doesn't mean you couldn't do it.
Okay.
You can always ask.
Thank you.
I think we went off on a little bit of a tangent, but actually I think it answered, it pretty much gave the gist of all this. But I'm gonna sort of summarize my personal feeling about it. And I think it's gonna be one of those things that's not gonna make anyone very satisfied. And that's gonna be, you're running about $1.3, $1.4 million a year in workers' comp. It's really hard, but some years are cheap and some years are expensive. There's a lot of variance because it's a small program and some of the claims can be severe. So even though I can say 1.3 million for next year, it could be 2, it could be 600,000, impossible to know. I don't know how much of that is presumptive illness. It's probably a good quarter of it. I'm just guessing. I don't want to be, if someone told me it was a half, I couldn't argue. And if they told me it was 20%, I couldn't argue. But in a way, it's irrelevant because what happens in the future doesn't necessarily have to be the past. But for the argument's sake, let's say it's a third. On that third, those claims could happen. They could have happened 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. No way to tell. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to get into a situation where you're negotiating with the county after the fact. Okay, any more questions on this?
A question about the presentation or these particular pages?
About what?
About the presentation or these particular pages?
Whatever you choose.
Okay. I do have a question, please, Chair Conroy.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Diana, could you elaborate a little bit on how the self-insured retention works and how the administration of the claims work? So we have a $750,000 SIR. Is that a cap to our exposure for all claims? Is it 750,000 not including loss adjustment expense and other associated expenses? Could you describe a little bit about how that works?
Is that a Glicksman question?
That's
Well, I think he asked me.
Ms. Chick-Fadden, please.
So it's per claim. So think of it like in layman's terms, like a deductible on your insurance.
Well, actually, Diane, it's per occurrence, isn't it?
Yes, it's per occurrence. So typically, like we just had a situation where we had and it's not completely relevant, but we had a very, very old claim that under our previous risk pool where the person had bilateral carpal tunnel. And the excess insurance carrier that was hired by the risk pool to cover us beyond the $750,000 SIR wanted to treat it as two separate claims so they didn't have to reimburse us because we were into it for about $1 million. And they said, no, we're not going to give you anything. It's the left hand and the right hand. But it is typically per claim. And if the doctor says it's one claim, it should be one claim. Anything beyond the $750,000 is covered by excess insurance that is negotiated and contracted with through the risk pool. Currently, we are members of PRISM, which used to be called CSAC, which every county in California is a member of except Los Angeles County. So it's a very large pool. And we recently moved over to them after being an ICRMA for about 25 years because our premiums kept going up. We kept our SIR the same, but we don't get too many claims that hit the $750,000 limit until probably long after these people are retired. Some people have they get future medical, and that's where the expense really gets up there. Usually these people will retire and 10 years later they have to have a major surgery or something like that, and then you start getting towards the $750,000. So it's not a whole lot of claims we have that the insurance is going to kick in and pay for beyond that.
Is the 750 reflective of all expenses, or is it specific to loss of earnings and medical bills?
It's supposed to be all expenses, although we use a third-party administrator for everything except for the 4850, which he was talking about earlier. We do that through payroll, but we do report that amount.
Well, you have to report it.
Yes.
And
so it's all inclusive.
Is there a stop loss for us? So do we have an additional self-insured retention or deductible for the excess carrier?
No, we have different layers though, different companies that will insure us. So we'll have somebody that insures us from $751,000 to $3 million, and then we'll have another company that is insuring us to $5 million, and so on and so on. Okay. But they just pay for it at that point.
Okay, I have a kind of an off-the-wall question. In California, workers' compensation is not an exclusive remedy. Do we find, is it restricted by MOU that the person cannot use a methodology other than work comp? Or is it unrestricted and we do have instances where somebody decides to go ahead and pursue the city outside of a workers' compensation claim for an on-the-job injury?
We treat it as the sole exclusive remedy because that's the way the law is written. So, I mean, I suppose somebody could file a claim, but
yeah, that doesn't happen.
People
as a practical matter, I've never seen it
all the time, but I haven't seen that particular thing. I mean, unless they were wrapping it into like a stress claim or something, although I haven't seen it here.
No, I've seen private sector claims that would have exceeded the $1 million statutory threshold. So they sought the non-exclusive remedy as a workaround to that cap.
Oh, probably because they had a limit. Their insurance limits ended at $1 million.
Right. Yeah.
But ours don't end at $1 million. But don't tell anybody that.
Okay. Well, then that answers the question. Where
they go up to like 25 million.
Okay, that answers the question.
Again, that's
nobody would want to.
We don't want to advertise that.
Right. Nobody would want to use. Well, too late. Here we are. no one would want to use the non-exclusive remedy because it would not otherwise be capped. Or by a policy cap that a private carrier or the city or someone else might have.
I think that's the state of California requires that for private employers, $1 million. That like is the,
Yeah, it's statutorily that. But I have had claims where people did not pursue it on a workers' compensation basis, but pursued it on a general liability basis because there was a greater limit there. So that's why I asked the question if there were other perhaps that could lead to an instance where these numbers would not otherwise capture everything if somebody had pursued it under a different theory. But seeing as how there's not a cap and it's maybe either covered by the MOU or some other statutory requirement, then it was just something that would not happen and did not happen in our city. Just want to ask that question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions or ready to fly?
I see no other questions at this time, Steve. You can keep
Okay.
going.
What is next? The next report.
Are you asking Jennifer to move down her?
Well, no, I want to know. I think we've pretty much. I think we've gotten to the information you needed to know on the fire. I think we're there. So I was going to end the fire and move on to the regular workers' comp liability.
Seeing no hands from the commissioners, and I have no additional questions on this point, Stephen, you can feel free to move on.
Do you have a preference? Let's do the workers' comp next, okay?
That's fine.
Now, if during the workers' comp, it makes someone think of a fire question, I think that would be fair, and I'll go back to it. Okay? So I'm looking now at the regular workers' comp report, and let's.
Page?
I'm gonna go there now. Let's go to page PDF 4.
was this in
PDF 4?
packet?
Go back a little more.
The city's actuarial study for the city.
That's two. Oh, I'm looking at PDF 4.
I'm asking Jennifer if this this is the city's the whole city, correct?
So I have Glicksman's study here, Stephen's study here, or do you want me to go to the agenda packet? Page 4. What are you looking at, Stephen?
I'm looking at PDF 4 of the workers' comp study.
For the entire city?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if I have that. Is that part? Maybe it's in the agenda packet. And
I don't know if it was included. I thought we just were doing the fire study.
yeah, I don't think I have that.
So I don't think he needs to discuss the citywide actuarial report because it wasn't agenda.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Let's just keep it to fire.
We can't speak to anything that hasn't been issued to the public.
Exactly. It's not in blue
Oh,
folder
what
or
a
anything.
disappointment.
I know. It's disappointing.
Next time.
So I can't talk about it then?
No, I mean, you can
No.
talk about the fire actuarial study, just the fire
That's it.
department. And if they have questions or if they, you can.
Oh, what a disappointment. Don't look so happy, Diane. I'm
They
just
get to go
teasing.
home now.
No, actually, I'm traveling tomorrow. I'm going to the country of Georgia.
Nice.
Yeah.
Safe travels.
I had my COVID test today because I didn't know if the airline is going to require it. And this is a real Florida story. So I get to the COVID testing center. No one there has been vaccinated. Who would do that job? I mean,
The testing
I don't
center?
know whether you've been vaccinated or not, okay? I certainly am. I mean, I don't want to tell somebody what to eat, so I don't want to tell them to get vaccinated, But
Having
Who
been
would take
raised
the
in
job?
Florida and spending a lot of time there, that's definitely a Florida story.
who in their right mind would get a job testing people that think they have COVID without getting vaccinated?
Floridians, I think, is the answer to that question.
First of all, that's what we say about, I used to live in California, and I can tell you that living here, in all honesty, is way better. But
the question is, what's the probability of that being the case?
Good one.
Good. Thank you.
I lived in California and well, you never, I don't want to knock California, but I can tell you that I can't believe people in that testing center didn't get vaccinated. Who would do that? Who would hire them?
I see a hand from Commissioner Solomon.
He would hire them?
No. I think he has a question for you.
Go ahead, sir.
No, I don't have a question so much as a procedural thought, Chair Conroy. So we have this report. Thank you, Stephen, for putting this all together for us. It's really very informative. The city council, when they were doing the budget process, went ahead and, as part of the reason why I asked for this, the previous feasibility study be presented, they have budgeted, the city council has, for another review of county services and also a review or proposal of what a regional fire department would look like. The letter has been sent to the county by the city requesting some information and how all of that's going to go about. So my suggestion, if I could be so bold, I'll call it a motion, would be for Mr. Glicksman's report on the workers' compensation number specific to the fire department be forwarded to the city council. And Jennifer, however you think that would be best to do that, so that they would have the information at the juncture in which they either approve or move forward or get numbers back from LA County, another feasibility study, so that this is included with that information as well.
Well, before you go further, I want to bring something to your attention on page PDF 3 of my report. Top of PDF 3. The intended usage.
Okay.
Okay.
So is it not, we're not permitted to do that?
Well, I don't care if you do or don't. What I don't want to do is I don't want to create a duty to the county fire department.
No, I think what you captured there, Stephen, in the intended usage remark is that this would provide just simple guidance based on a snapshot in time for the city council to take a look at that.
Correct.
And whether or not they wanted to, at that juncture, go back and say, that's great, Mr. Glicksman, can you update this report for us? Then they'd have the opportunity to do so.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, let's say let's say that they decide to take you on and then every firefighter makes a claim the next day and they go, listen, we didn't know that. Glicksman, send us a check.
There was a famous Supreme Court justice named Leonard Hand. And his quote is, on a clear day, you can foresee forever. Based on Paul's Graph versus Long Island Railroad. So yeah, you can't foresee, you can foresee. If they do that, then we'll work it, they'll figure it out at that point. That's what city council gets to do.
Okay. Okie dokie.
So to your point, Commissioner Solomon, you're requesting or proposing a motion that we provide Mr. Glicksman's latest information to council for their further consideration of county fire versus continuing city fire?
At the point at which that arises, whatever that's the exchange between the city is and the county is happening right now. When that report would come back, I don't know. But what I would ask is that this be received and filed for inclusion with that feasibility study to the council when it does happen.
Or as an addendum to it. Okay, well, if you're proposing that as a motion, then I would certainly look for a second. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Can I be part of the discussion until you do that? Would I have an opportunity to discuss the report with them? Because I think there's a lot of nuances in this report that they would benefit from.
That would be a decision that Jennifer Paul, the finance director, and the city manager would have at the time.
Yeah, I'm sure
Bring it
you,
to the council, I would think.
we would definitely would want you there.
Thanks.
Yes.
Can I just call on Commissioner Samples? I see his hand up.
Thank you. I think I'm a little confused because on the one hand, I agree that this needs to be forwarded to the city council so they can include it in their deliberations. But I don't see any conclusion or any statements that kind of put a framework around what all the numbers mean. I mean, it's a fabulous report, and Stephen, it's a great job. But I'm not sure exactly what we're communicating to the council if we just send this along.
Well, I guess that was my thinking. That's why I wanted to be part of the discussion.
Well, Mel, if you'd like to make a friendly amendment to the motion, I'm all ears.
Oh,
Well, to further the question, Stephen, do you have, based on the presentation you gave us and some of the parts of the presentation maybe you weren't able to give us, is there a summary and a recommendation on your behalf?
I don't know what I would recommend. I mean, I don't know any, I don't have an opinion on whether or not you should give the county, your firefighters. I have no idea.
honestly, I don't think that I would be looking for a recommendation. I would be looking for some very simple framework that explains the value or explains the cost of staying versus the cost of going.
I think that would be a different study.
It would kind of be a different study, and I'm not sure.
I think I get what you're saying. I think it could be summarized in a memorandum.
So, Mel,
it wouldn't be a recommendation because first of all, I'm in no position to recommend one or the other.
Right.
Certainly, but you could say which is, even though no one's crystal ball is 2020, you could say based on what we do know, that one would have this set of costs versus another approach would have another set of costs. You could do that.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. But I don't want to get in the position where I'm taking one side or the other.
I understand.
I don't have a dog in the fight on this one.
I understand, but you could present the information.
Correct.
Based on what we do know. And I think that would be very helpful to the council.
For what it's worth, all of our discussions were exactly what you're talking about. How do we create a framework so that we can understand it? Not so much a recommendation one way or the other, but let's come up with some honest and legitimate evaluation of the differences. That's what we were looking for in the first place. So I think we're on the same page as you.
Commissioner Solomon, I see your hand up.
okay, thank you, Chair Conroy. So Commissioner Samples, I'll take a stab at what you're describing and ask for your guidance as to whether or not I'm capturing your intent.
Okay.
Based on our discussion and the report summary and results for the analysis, if at some point we decided to no longer have our own fire department, the estimated costs on these dates are here, we would incur no new claims.
I'm losing you.
Other than expected or anticipated presumptive injuries going forward, and over a period of time, those presumptive injuries would begin to mitigate as well.
Well, it's just natural, right? I mean, as time goes on, they're less likely to happen.
I'm just trying to see if that captures what Mel's thought process.
Commissioner Solomon, I think that's very much along the lines of what I was thinking. And Stephen, for what it's worth, the assessment that was done by members of the council that didn't have access to this kind of information, their assumption was that our workers' comp claims would continue to rise over the next 10 years. And our question was, and intuitively, it didn't sound like that was accurate. And I think that's what you're describing. So I think what Commissioner Solomon just suggested probably sounds as close as I could get to a statement.
Well, there's another thing too that's not in here, and that's the 4850. And, I think I have it in here, it's about 60,000 a year, but again, it's variable. So, but I'll be honest with you, it seems a little bit like the dog, like tail, it seems a little like the tail's wagging the dog. Because this really isn't a lot of money. I think workers' comp is going to be about 10% of the fire department salaries when all is said and done. Some years it'll be 15, some years it'll be 5.
And that's what we've seen historically.
What's that?
And that's what we've seen historically.
Yeah, sometimes it's going to be 5. I think I have it as 841. And you add this, maybe it goes to $9 with the 4850. So, so let's say $9, 9%. But some years it's going to be 6 and some years it's going to be 12.
Yeah, I think the value of the report, and I understand where you're coming from, Commissioner Samples, to add some sort of context to it, is that, Stephen, this is a controversial subject in our city. Mm-hmm. And what my goal would be is that we want to try and keep it as much of a sterile analysis as possible without steering, for lack of a better way of putting it, some sort of agenda. So the sterile analysis is, here are the numbers based on these next several years, exclusive of 4850. Should you decide that we would no longer carry our own fire department, direct injuries would cease on that date, our responsibility for them, and legacy injuries would continue that we're already paying on, and presumptive injuries, while they would begin to mitigate, might still arise.
I think I know what you're after.
And I think that's the most sterile way I can put it.
I think that could be put into 2 pages, as long as they don't want a lot of exhibits and backup.
Commissioner Solomon, I just exactly the way you just articulated it, I would be inclined to put that as the cover on this information.
Okay, Jennifer, should I repeat that? Can we go back to the videotape? How do you try and repeat it?
You're on mute, Jennifer.
You're muted.
Thank you. If you could repeat it, that would be great, because I'm taking a lot of different notes.
Okay, so this report captures what our present value of the estimated numbers are out several years. If we were to opt for a county model rather than retaining our own fire department, new direct injury claims would cease on that date. Exclusive of 4850, we would still have this analysis, we would still have our existing claims going forward, which we're responsible for. And we could have legacy claims that arise after the date of transfer. But those legacy claims, presumptive injury claims would begin to abate the further out we were from that severance date.
I think that's a fair comment. Now I don't know, and it's actually a pretty reasonable thing to do, I think. The question that I have for you is, what do you want me to do on the legacy claims? Do I need to do any kind of detail on that, or because, I didn't look at the legacy claims. I don't know whether or not you've had 5 or 10.
Now that's not for us to say or to ask about, Stephen. It's something that would be a direction from the city council to.
But it actually is part of your question. It's actually part of your question, right? Because I said they're going to diminish over time. The natural question then is to ask how much, how fast.
Right, and as an advisory board, we ask those sort of questions in ponderance rather than, and then we get direction as to whether or not that is something the city council wants to hear about.
So if I want to make sure I say it really clear. The report, you're asking, I'm going to put something together, and the facts are they are going to abate over the time. That's a good word. But what I write will not say how fast or how much.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's understood.
Okay.
It's fine.
Is that clear for all of us, Jennifer?
I would
Okay, thank you.
second Commissioner Solomon's statement and then submit this to a vote to receive and file.
Okay, so from what I'm hearing, that description by Commissioner Solomon was a motion seconded by Commissioner Samples, correct? If
Yeah,
so,
correct.
okay, understood. With that, then we can go to a roll call vote.
We have the public, I think.
Public.
Oh,
Mayor Comrade?
absolutely right. Yes, is there, well, yeah. Are there any public comments as it relates to item J1? Okay, seeing none. Then we will now go to a roll call vote. Commissioner Johnson,
Coming off mute, aye.
Commissioner Solomon,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye as well. So filed. So received and filed.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yes, thank you for your time, Stephen.
Thank
That
you.
was very helpful.
Can I go?
Have a good trip.
Yeah, I think
Yes,
Oh,
we're done.
thank you.
Thank you.
When do you need my work by?
I think that's the
Discuss it.
question for staff.
Yeah, we'll talk after you get back from your trip.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Diane. Thank you for letting me do the work.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Stephen.
coming
Thank you,
tonight
Steve.
Goodbye.
and staying up late.
All right. With that, moving on to item J2, unless there's any preference to, well, no, we already had that. We already had the opportunity to switch things around. So going on to item J2, discussion and possible action regarding utilizing Moss Adams for future services in the proposed fiscal year 2021-2022 internal audit plan, presented by L.R. Manzano, Stephen Deals, and Jennifer Paul.
Okay, so I'll take over. I'm city clerk. I'm Eleanor Manzano. About 5 years ago, we did an RFP and Moss Adams was the provider for the internal control program. And actually, as of June, the contract expired. However, it was, obviously on hold last year due to budget constraints and COVID. And so, and the council has reinstated the $100,000 for this year, and we'll be going to council to amend that contract. So at this time, Mark Stranka will provide some information on what's next. So there you go, Mark.
All right. Well, good evening. And clearly from the commissioner members, I need to get a better background because you've all got something better going on behind you. So Mark Starenka, partner with Moss Adams. We've served as your outsourced internal auditor. It's great to see you all. It's been a while for sure. And hopefully one of these days we'll actually be back in person. So I am going to share my screen and I'm going to walk you briefly through the proposed program for FY 21-22. Let me just expand it here. Here we go. You can see that okay? Great, thank you. All righty. So where do I want to start? So, we've actually had, I think the elements of this proposed program sort of queued up for the past, I'll say actually 18 months or whatever it is. But we did take a fresh look, worked with management, so with Eleanor, with Jennifer, to identify projects that we thought were most beneficial to the city, given where we are today. And we're really doing that from the following perspective. Our sort of charter is to focus on risks, controls, efficiency, effectiveness, of course, bring in best practices, help you operate more as compliantly as possible. And this slide and the next one are ones I always sort of incorporate. And so part of our philosophy and approach is to try to have a blend of types of projects each year within reason, and certainly over a multi-year period, that we are touching multiple facets of the city, meaning we're trying to do things that reduce risks, We're trying to do things that strengthen controls and compliance, and trying to do things that enhance performance, efficiency, and effectiveness. And each year, kind of having those lens of consideration for projects, but also trying to make sure that we're tackling projects that would seem to be the highest priority each year. So working with management, we've identified these 5 activities, top 4 of which are projects. And so I'm just going to walk through these briefly. So the first one, Fraud, Waste, and Abuse FWA Program Development and Training. So this was one we actually started before pre-COVID, and when things were put on hold. And so this is really just to finish that project. And what we mean by finish is finalize building out of the program policies and procedures, and then providing training to the city on those policies and procedures. And again, the objective of Fraud, Waste, Abuse program is twofold. What's usually thought of as a detective mechanism. When you have a hotline, which the city does, that it's a detective mechanism. We can get reports that tell us about something that might have been bad. But really, you want the program to be preventive. And that's the whole purpose of not just having a hotline, but actually having a program where we're educating the workforce about what fraud, waste, and abuse is, what not to do, what to be on the lookout for, because really, you don't want to, yes, you want to detect things when they happen, but you'd much prefer to prevent them from happening. And so that's the purpose of actually having a program. So finishing out the development of that and then providing the training. And we do that lots of other places, so very common activity. The second one, internal service fund review. So that's really a byproduct of performing our policies and procedure assessment and gap analysis. And this is one of the areas that needed focus, and actually the city has worked on its internal service fund policy. But there's also, from looking at work to do, and this is a common area of focus within cities also, of making sure that those internal service funds are working for the city the way that you want them to. So areas of focus and consideration are governance, the sources and uses of the funds, how the services are and what services are being delivered, the systems that are using to support that information. So basically looking under the hood, how the internal service funds are set up and being operated within the city, and make sure that they're working the way that you would like them to, or being optimized for the city. Again, a very common area of focus within internal audit. Third area, procurement operational review. This has been on the, I'll say it's sort of the pseudo list, I think pretty close from the beginning, but we've had higher priorities to address it. Procurement, sort of in a nutshell, a classically decentralized activity in a local government, a city or a county, with central elements, but typically you don't have the optimal blend of central policy, guidance, monitoring to make sure that the decentral activities are happening consistently, efficiently, compliantly. That's certainly the case here, which makes you no different than almost any other city that we work with. It's a good area to focus in on, make sure that the policies and procedures are what you want them to be, and developed centrally, promulgated centrally, and that the processes, the controls, the performance is there, so that the activity that's happening decentrally across the city is happening the way that you would like it to be happening. And then the fourth area is just policy training. So there are a few policies that have already been developed. There'll be updates probably, or relook at the ISF policy when we get through with the Internal Service Fund review. And the city's asked if we would provide training in these areas as they happen. So even though we show on the next slide, you'll see the timing of it. The timing will probably be sprinkled in when the policies. I think, Eleanor, I think I saw you raising a finger?
No.
No, okay, great.
I mean, the CalCard is currently pretty much complete. I think
right.
Department heads or the management need to review it, and then I think it's pretty much done.
Yep. And then the final element, number 5, is just our standard. We've had it each year, our what we'll just call program management. So these meetings are staff reports, presentations to the council, just on the management of the program. And then I'll just conclude with just showing you
Mark,
the proposed. Yeah.
If I can interrupt before you go
You
to the
bet,
next
you bet.
slide, Commissioner Samples had his hand up. I want to
Yes.
recognize him, please.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mark. So looking at all of this in a comment that you said, talking about policies, you've made a comment a couple of times about what you want them to be. And I'm kind of wondering, we have our idea of what we want them to be, and we have some policies and procedures. We have some municipal code items that appear to be extremely outdated. Is there anything in your work where you come back to the city and say, you know what, this is no longer best practice, or this is no longer common practice, and we would suggest that you change some of these things?
So yes, I don't believe, and Eleanor, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to remind me, I don't believe we've looked at the municipal code in the policy review. Do you recall?
I think the only thing regarding the municipal code was probably some of the tasks that maybe the city clerk does that relates
The
to
roles and responsibilities portion of the report.
and then the city treasurer.
Yeah.
The city treasurer, maybe.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
And then of course that also involved the charter.
Okay.
Yeah, that was charter review, not municipal code.
Right. And yeah, we did not do that. But the other thing I was going to mention, Commissioner Samples, is, but in our policy inventory and assessment, we absolutely identified gaps in a prioritized plan, for addressing those gaps. And those gaps were either policies missing or elements of policies missing or outdated elements of policies. And so the things that the city has already been working on, reflecting grants, CalCard, ISF, are in that list. And the city management has been working on updating those policies. We've been supporting and reviewing them to be able to give feedback. And so that process is happening. In that last comment, that was one of the reasons that was a priority project, doing that policy review, because we kind of knew there was work to be done. So we wanted to be able to assess upfront and create a roadmap that the city can then chip away at over time, which is what they've been doing.
Okay. Well, ISF is kind of a discussion I really don't want to get into here, but Chapter 6 of our municipal code talks about purchasing practices. And as a general observation, it appears to be extremely outdated. And there are some things where there are essentially no controls at all. And some of the things that we have done over the last several years as a city in our procurements satisfy the requirements of Chapter 6, but they don't sound like they are best practices or consistent with other cities.
Gotcha.
So I guess my question is, how do we add that kind of review into what you're doing? Because it sounds, at least to me, that that's important.
Well, it would, so it's the easy answer relative to procurement. We would definitely look at that as part of the procurement operational review. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You betcha.
All right. Mark, I have a question for you. So I've seen the tables before from Moss Adams listing the identified items and then status as far as, working on or in progress, complete. Here's my concern. I don't know that I've ever heard a final report that said, okay, all of the items have been met, or all but these 3 items have been met, and here's why, or here's what we're going to do, or it'll be wrapped up in the next quarter. So kind of my question is, what items are straggling from prior audit periods, and what's the procedure for getting those wrapped up?
So I'll just respectfully say that's a question for management. Because they're responsible for the response to the audits and the audit findings.
And
management, you're referring to staff?
Yeah, sorry, staff. Yes, thank you.
I can expound on that. You might recall that, so when the auditor finds something It's not, snap your fingers and fix it. Sometimes it requires additional personnel. It might require, some other kind of review, and there's a cost associated with it. So then the public process is you have to go get money allocated from the city council when it's required. And that's kind of been the rub. Like, we haven't been able to get money because the budget's been so tight. So there have been reviews. I mean, Marnie was kind of in the hot seat a couple times, even before this committee, where people were asking about the status and just saying, well, we can do what we can do, but we can't do everything because we don't have the resources. So there's priorities in discovering what needs to get done, and then you have to prioritize based on your resources what you can actually get done. And that's the 40,000 foot picture.
I appreciate that, Treasurer Deals. What I would like to see, and I think what would be beneficial to everyone is that prior internal audit plan and what items weren't complete and why. And if it's because of budget constraints, then it should say so. And that final report should be made available. That would be my recommendation.
And Jennifer, don't you have sort of a running status of that covers that type of information?
Well, there are two things. So there's the published report with our responses that I reviewed. And then we have a rubric based on, the policies and procedures that we're working on updating. And then, so I don't think we're at I mean, that would be a good thing to do at the inception, is to check the status, because that report is slightly outdated as far as where we are now. I don't think it presents an accurate picture of where we stand. So I would propose that initializing just a review of current state would be helpful, because that last published final document that stated all of the, I don't want to call them findings, but the conclusions, we had staff response to that. So our staff response is more accurate, but again, that was several years back. So I think maybe documenting current state would be helpful. And like I said, I've got an Excel rubric that's documenting where we are. I've asked my team to send in their desk procedures, because one of my jams, I like to say, is documenting policies, procedures, and processes. But I haven't found anything published that's an accurate depiction of where we're actually at. And then I think any kind of understaffing or lack of resources would be very important to note. Stephen Deals, thank you very much for bringing that up. So what we could do is I could work together and kind of see a status. And then again, I'm looking at this timeline, and it's a little bit robust considering all the other things that we're trying to accomplish right now. So I want to just be mindful of that as well.
We have a 2020-2021 report that was provided by Moss Adams, correct?
Is that the one where it included the staff, our responses that noted that we disagreed with the conclusions? Let me look for that real quick.
I recall going over that in a commission meeting, and that wasn't 2 years ago, which makes me think it was a 2020-2021 report. I would just say we need to put a bow on it for all the good work that Moss Adams did and all the good work that city staff did to try to meet those requests, and then have that final report. This is where we ended up. I just would hate for it to just get put in, in a folder, in a drawer, in a room, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm looking at an outdated one. The internal controls one I'm looking at is from 2017. So
there's definitely a more recent version than that, and I'm sure somebody can get you a copy of it.
I would love that.
I think he's talking about regarding, I think the spreadsheet that Marnie does, I think was doing like on a quarterly basis, I believe.
Yeah, the one I'm referring to had status, like in progress, complete.
Oh, that's the rubric I referred to. Okay.
Correct.
Provide that, certainly. Gotcha.
Well, yeah, provide that as well as for everything that is not currently complete from the prior year's report. Why isn't it complete? And to Steve's point, it might be because of budget constraints, but we should have we should have a final wrap up, in my opinion, before we start talking about a whole new report. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. With that, I'm gonna turn it over to Commissioner Solomon. I see he had his hand up first. You're muted. There you go.
Thank you, Chair Conroy. A couple of quick questions, please, Mark. It might be for Eleanor or Jennifer more specifically. On item 3, the procurement operational review, is that going to be for all contracts over 35,000, or is it going to be for all contracts? Is there a scope there that would narrow that down a little bit? Because if it's for all procurement procedures, I mean, every department head has latitude up to the 35,000, and they get put on a consent calendar and approved. Versus, and then again, the difference between things that are going out to bid, that are required to go out to bid, versus items that the department heads in our city have latitude to go ahead and select providers. So just kind of curious to get a little bit deeper view of when you think about that review, what your idea of what it's going to be, Mark.
Sure. So I would say a little bit broader or more encompassing than what you were describing, which is what we're going to want to look at this point are what types of contracts, what types of purchases in procurement is happening across the city. And there are going to be different types, as you were just describing. And are they, and how are they being conducted? Are they being conducted, for example, compliantly with the policies that are in place? Or are they not being, is there variety across the city? I'm sure that we'll find a little bit of everything. This is not going to be sort of where you might have been going is, okay, we're going to take contracts of a certain size and test those. So, and if we were, we'd say that's a procurement internal controls testing project. This is sort of broader, taking a more encompassing look at procurement on the city and really getting a sense of where it's working, how we want it to, where it can work more efficiently, more effectively, and what are the things that will help that, of which we would expect policies, procedures, controls, processes, all to be opportunities for improvement.
Okay, that's helpful. So it's not just a means tested programming; it's beyond scope of that.
Yeah, I don't think we're ready for that. I don't think that would be as productive as sort of getting a lay of the land first.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, we are sort of all over the place on our procurement procedures, and so I think that'll really help to clean up. On item 2, the internal service fund review. The city almost has its own proprietary segments of our ISF. You know, for example, our vehicle replacement fund, the formula as it's been described to this commission in the past is something that the city staff came up with, for lack of a better way of putting it, and have used for a number of years. It was expressed, if I remember correctly, that there is no sort of baseline out there, no out of the box solution. It's something that's created with the staff based on our experience. We have a lot of that with our ISF funds. And I just don't know that 12 weeks is enough because of the number of internal service funds that we have and the way that there are some standardized methodologies and some boutique methodologies that are used within the city. If 12 weeks is going to be enough. So did you come up with 12 weeks as a guideline, or in consultation with the treasurer, finance director, and clerk, or how'd you come up with the 12 weeks on that?
12 weeks is just, I'll say, typical. So, you know, could it end up being a couple more weeks or something like that? Perhaps. Could it be a little bit shorter? Perhaps. But what you described is not unusual. What we're really looking for is to make are those processes in place? So I'll just pick an example. For fleet, it would not be uncommon to find that there is not a depreciation table and forecast for replacing fleet in a city. You'd say, how could that possibly be? Well, it could, it's very, very easily could be the case. And so you're looking for, okay, is that in place? Do we actually have a forecast for replacing vehicles? Yes, no. And what does it look like? And, and we're not doing, in this case, since we're not looking at a particular internal service fund, which is kind of to your point, we're looking across the landscape of internal service funds. We're going to fly at a little bit higher level. So we're not going to go down and scrub the absolute details of the fleet replacement forecast, but we're going to look, is it there? And, does it look like it's reasonable? And again, it wouldn't be uncommon to find cases where things like that do and don't exist, or but the fact that they're sort of internally developed, that's common. It's, are we using the right sort of assumptions and bases, or reasonable assumption bases to drive those? And so those would be the types of things we'd be looking for.
Not necessarily looking at the methodology so much as is the formula work.
Yeah,
is that accurate or no?
Yeah, but some of the methodology. I probably won't come up with a good example, so I'll make it really generic. Well, let's use fleet. We have a fleet replacement fund, and are we allocating the cost of fleet by the number of vehicles that a department uses, which intuitively would seem pretty fair, or the number of people they have in the department, regardless of how many vehicles they use? So we would kind of look at, okay, is the assumption that they're using reasonable? Okay, so the basis of what they're doing, is going to get you a reasonable number for allocating that cost, or get you an unreasonable number for allocating that cost, versus going into the detail of looking at the exact forecast, doing a check on the numbers, et cetera. So we're not doing a deep dive there, but we're doing sort of a 10,000 foot look to see what's in place and how are things working. Hopefully
okay.
that helps.
That's really helpful. One thing, and I don't know if it would be appropriate or not, so you can please tell me. Within our city, we use our internal service funds a lot of times for one-time appropriations to pay for other things. So you might find a one-time appropriation from the vehicle replacement fund to pay for capital and part of a different project. And I'd like to know if whether or not that is something that is not uncommon or is common, that the use of internal service funds on one-time allocations to help balance budgets is normal, or something that's out of the norm.
It does happen. I won't say it's super frequent, but it's not infrequent. So it's not like it's an anomaly. But the key there is what is it being used to pay for? And usually it's a loan, right? It's a loan from one to another, so that you're not collecting something for one basis and using it for another basis. And so that's kind of more of what you're looking for. So one-time things, yes, we see that, but the more important element would be, are we using it for
some sort of
appropriate purposes, or we have built in that we are able to make, for example, a loan from one to the other, right? Are we following a policy that's in place or not?
Yeah, it's a loan from the ISF fund to the general fund, but there's not often a nexus of use. Something from the vehicle replacement fund or the wastewater fund might be used for something that is a completely different purpose. So two more quick questions, please, and then I'll step aside. One is a comment on number one, the fraud, waste, and abuse programming. Commissioner Samples, I remember Marnie remarking that, or maybe it was Eleanor, that hadn't been done because of the temporary suspension of the budgeting for Moss Adams. So that's why that wasn't done.
Correct.
And with regard to things that might, as Steve Deals mentioned, that would be a charter review versus a municipal code review. A lot of times those things kind of look like they wash over each other. As part of our budget for the fiscal, the city council did ask for and receive some money for charter review. And what that's going to end up looking like is yet to be seen. whether or not they'll bring in a charter review committee to help them, whether or not that'll be something where specific items of the charter are targeted or micro-targeted, but that's something that's separate from this, beyond the municipal code is getting looked at. And thank you for your time.
You betcha. I think Commissioner, sorry, go ahead, Chair.
All right. Commissioner Johnson, you have the floor.
Okay, Mark, you can call on me. That's fine.
Well, I was overstepping my bounds.
No, not at all. You're in charge of this engagement. First of all, welcome back. It's
Thank you.
been a while. I
Yes.
feel like the last time we saw you, we were all still meeting in person.
We were.
Yeah, and I just want to comment on Chair Conroy's observation. My recollection is very similar, that we had a series of open projects that were put on hold during the first year of the pandemic when we didn't have funding. And it would be very good to see the status of those projects. And in fact, my recollection was that when we were meeting in person, what we asked and we thought made sense is that you would come and meet with us quarterly so that we would get an update from you quarterly rather than like an annual update on how the projects were going. So I also feel, and it's hard to believe, it's been a year and a half, but that there were open projects that were not completed. And regardless, when I say that, it's also recommendations that were not fully remediated. So if they were not done because of staffing issues or whatever causes over the past year and a half, I totally agree that the report should be reviewed, the recommendations should be reviewed, the status should be reviewed, and we should say yes, done, or no, not done, and we're okay with the fact that it's not done, because there was open items for sure.
Yeah, and I think, Commissioner, you're referring to the report that Marnie used to share, correct?
Well, it's been so long, but yes.
But yeah. And so I was just going to add to that, this sort of topic earlier. So what's common with most of the cities and counties that we work with in this regard is, we're delivering reports and they've got findings and recommendations in them. As city management, they provide a response, but now we're just talking the report. And then city management is tracking their responses overall to the list of findings that come across multiple reports. So over time, in being able to provide the commission an update on those. And that's what Marnie had been doing. That's what Jennifer was referring to. I think she's going through the process of, updating and find out where we really are. And yes, I think that makes a lot of sense to do on a quarterly basis, because that gives enough time for things to develop, and get accomplished. And then I'll just make one other comment. I'm just giving you this is an example to sort of reaffirm in a way the quarterly frequency. So for some cities, there are sort of three activities. We provide a report with findings and recommendations. Then there's a tracking of responses or corrective actions to those. So finding, recommendation, management response, and then the third element is validation, that the management response is actually addressed the finding, right? And so we do that typically quarterly with our clients. So what you're talking about is very reasonable, gives the city time to actually get things accomplished. And you're just really asking for, we're doing these audits, what's actually translating into new practice at the city, and so that we know we're actually getting value from spending the money on us to identify things, because the intent is to help the city do what it does better. So
yep, agree with all that, and great to have you back, Mark and Moss Adams. So glad to see that there's a current year internal audit plan. So thank you.
You betcha. Thank you.
Commissioner Solomon, your hand's up.
Thank you, Chair Conroy. Mark, I want to echo what Commissioner Johnson's saying. Everybody on the commission, those of us who are here, those of us who are not here, lobby to have you back with us and your firm, and we really value the work that you do and the analysis that you're doing. So I want to echo what Commissioner Johnson was saying. Very valuable to have you back, and thank you. It is good to see you again. One question, please, for Eleanor. It was raised a moment ago or a little bit earlier in this discussion. The roles and responsibilities component, which was the phase 1 of the Moss Adams report, that is something that has not been done and is not part of this plan here. So do you have an idea as to whether or not that analysis is going to come back or be reviewed? Has there been some discussions with Moss Adams prior to Jennifer coming on, or since Jennifer, maybe you can weigh in since you've come on, about revisiting the roles and responsibilities component?
Yeah, the only thing, I think Marnie was working on that, and I'm not sure. I think Jennifer was looking, because that was on the spreadsheet of where those statuses are related to that.
Okay, that's definitely something that has not been done.
Yeah, that's something I wasn't privy to. So I think Marnie was working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind words.
There were some things that are done though, however. So some of the things that Marnie worked on were some reporting requirements, and she did initiate those. So it's not true that nothing was done, just to be clear.
Thanks, Steve. Can you elaborate a little bit on what has been done then, please? There's some reporting requirements that the finance department has to make available to the city treasurer, and that hadn't been happening in the past, and it is now. Okay. Any other items that were part of the roles and responsibilities clarifications that have begun since the report came out?
I think there's the payroll, also payroll and human resource. I think those reports were figured out or concluded based on.
As far as formalizing the assignment of responsibilities from the city treasurer to finance, or from between the departments of clerk, finance, and treasurer, have the responsibilities and the methodologies behind assigning those responsibilities been clarified?
So actually, that's what Marnie was doing related to, I think she has it submitted to the city attorney's office, and that's where it's at.
Oh, okay. So that was
regarding the, regarding reports related to, we've tried a couple times regarding doing some reports, and they weren't working. So I'll have to meet back with finance to see how we get those working. It's been going on. We've been doing.
Okay, so that real meat of it, which was so illuminating as part of the report, how the roles and responsibilities were not clearly defined, is with the city attorney right now.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I had heard.
All right, seeing no other hands. Mark, is there more to your presentation you'd like to move on?
Just real briefly, so this was the proposed timing and just a summary of the budget to show that we're living within the $100,000 budget for internal audit activities, and the timing that we're proposing to perform these projects. And I don't know what shows up on your screen, but I'm moving what's on my screen so I can see the whole thing. Anyway, and not that the timing can't change, but we did review this with management, and often we're trying to make sure that the work is happening in a way that's not too intrusive to management and staff in terms of obviously their other duties. But we wanted to get the fraud, waste, and abuse finished up, since that's kind of where we left off. Get the internal service fund addressed, and then tackle the procurement. And like I said, the training might actually end up happening dispersed throughout the course of the year as policies are finalized. And that is it.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. And I also want to echo the appreciation that we all as a commission have for you and for the work that you and Moss Adams does for the city. It's a great service.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
All right, I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll just ask formally, are there any further questions or comments from the commissioners? Okay. Seeing none, are there any public comments?
No e-comments,
Okay,
and I don't see any attendees, no outside comments as well.
thank you, Doug. With that, can I get a motion to receive and file item J2?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All right, we'll do a roll call vote, beginning with Commissioner Nguyen.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon.
Aye.
Commissioner Samples. Chair votes aye as well. Item J2 is now received and filed. Moving on to item J3, presented by Chief Deputy City Treasurer Mehta.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nilesh Mehta, Chief Deputy City Treasurer, along with Stephen Dios, City Treasurer. And today we're going to be going over the Q4 quarterly report, as well as the fiscal year of 2021. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So in your packet on page 56, you'll find the Treasurer's quarterly admin report, along with FHN Main Street's quarterly report, and followed up with our PowerPoint presentation, which I have presented here in front of you. The Treasurer's portfolio summary is included, investment reporting guidelines, investment report by FHN, which includes a portfolio summary, investment policy compliance, the activity report, as well as the general economic and market update. And within this PowerPoint presentation, we're going to present the investment reporting objectives and guidelines, policy compliance, quarterly performance, cash flow analysis, fiscal impact, month-end portfolio book yield, the maturity distribution, sector allocation, historical book value, and finally, the trading activity for the year.
Obviously, this is all the same stuff that you've all seen. I think the only person this would be new for is Jennifer. So if you don't mind, we'll go through all these slides so that for the benefit of her, and then otherwise we could skip through it pretty quickly for you.
In our June meeting, and it wasn't our June meeting, we had our review of third quarter too. So
that is correct.
Which was our last meeting. So this is all very fresh in our minds. All right, please proceed.
Yeah, so you can move along. Safety, liquidity, yield, those are our priorities.
And then this slide just goes over the investment reporting guidelines. Remember, it's the public's money. As Steve mentioned, safety, liquidity, yield are the order in which we'd like to manage our investments.
Okay, that's good. This slide I like to reiterate though, this and the following one. So policies aren't clear, policies are inappropriate or not followed, or oversight was inadequate. So next slide. And then these are the questions that you want to ask as a board. So I definitely like to get this in front of you each time, and certainly if there is anybody from the public watching. But you do review the investment policy, and then do you understand the investment program? If not, ask. And then if you don't understand it, is it because it's us not doing a good job of presenting to you?
This slide goes over the policy compliance with regards to our investment policy. As you can see on the right-hand side, the right column, we were in compliance with the investment policy for the fourth quarter, and it goes over the items and the parameters with which it's evaluated by. Here's a snapshot of the 2021 performance for the fiscal year. On the right column, you'll see the fourth quarter. Just the key points are we as a city earned $1.57 million in interest year to date. Of that, approximately 49% goes towards the general fund. So contribution to the general fund is $771,300. At the beginning of the fiscal year, we had projected that we would contribute $750,000 towards the general fund. So we did meet those expectations.
Nilesh, so this is actually full year, fiscal year, correct?
Correct. This is,
yeah.
this is
So just quick question. So since we have a full year to look at, how did we end up versus how we thought we would end up, or budgeted or planned?
we had budgeted for a contribution to the general fund of $750,000.
So we're pretty much right there, it looks like.
We're very close. Yeah, given the circumstances that we went through for the fiscal year, yeah, we're what we projected and what we ended up actually contributing to the general fund were very close to each other.
All right, thank you.
I think, Jason, another good question to ask too is the 49% contribution to the general fund. And that's something that our department will be working with Jennifer to come up with that contribution rate, and something we should look at annually. So just so you know, Jennifer.
And if you have it handy, how does that compare to our current budget? If it was $750 for the current fiscal year, what is our estimate for the contribution to the general fund in the budget for the next year, both percentage and dollar-wise?
Dollar-wise, we are projecting to earn right around $750,000 as well.
Same thing?
Yeah.
And is that also at 49%?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
The dynamics will be different though. It's going to be neat. So go back if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. Look at the size of the portfolio. Total investment portfolio, $88 million. This is what I've been letting you all know, that we've seen a falling total portfolio amount over the years. A big part of that has been that we spent $15 million on the prepayment for PERS. But with the bond sale, we just bought $15 million in securities. So this $88 million just went up, which will show up in the current fiscal year, not last fiscal year, which is a very good thing. So the size of the portfolio matters in terms of your total returns. People tend to focus on the rate of return, but really it's both because they multiply against each other. So it's going to be interesting. We might reforecast that number now that we have a bigger potential portfolio.
So Steve, are you also saying that the sale of those bonds may have saved our bacon for the current fiscal year?
Well, yeah, it really did a very good job of smoothing out our expenses. It will increase the portfolio. We do, however, have debt to pay, but it's a smooth payment. So we were very fortunate to have been able to make these payments, these big cash lump sums we were making. But the rate of return they offered for them were higher than what the portfolio makes, given our trading constraints. So that was a good deal. So we'll see a bump in the investment portfolio size, but we still have the debt out there that has to get paid off, which to me is always a little disturbing when you're borrowing money to pay off debt. But nevertheless, that's
unless you're borrowing at a lower rate
Yeah.
in order to pay off,
Yeah.
it would otherwise be at a higher rate. Sure.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
And as Steve mentioned, here's a synopsis of the 1920 performance, and you can see that the total portfolio was greater, thus returning a higher interest earned amount at the bottom right. And here's further performance measures for 18-19. And in the admin report, we have a list of 5 fiscal years, so you can look through that. And the following chart goes over the cash flow analysis. This is very important for our city because we measure, we can figure out what monies to invest based on our liquidity needs. So here's a cash flow analysis for fiscal year 2021, and that compared with the prior fiscal year. And as I mentioned, the next slide talks about the fiscal impact for the city. And we just had a discussion where budgeted contribution amount was $750,000, and we contributed $771,300 towards the general fund. This chart is a month-by-month portfolio book yield since the beginning of the fiscal year. As you can see, it's a downward sloping chart, and we're currently at 1.6% at the end of June. And this chart goes over the maturity distribution for our portfolio. We have approximately 40% of our portfolio in investment vehicles that are maturing within 0 to 1 year, and so forth, 16% in 1 to 2, and so on.
Nilesh, going back to that last slide real quick. Could I just make, no, the one before that, please.
This one.
Could I just make a recommendation, and if anyone has a rebuttal, I'm open to it, obviously. This looks like we're falling through the floor. I think it would be a better perspective if this chart started at 0 rather than 1.4, and we have a better idea of what the actual percentage reduction is. Any thoughts on that?
I would let you know that graphically, it would push that way up it would push the curve up higher. You'd have a bigger gap down below, and we'd have to shrink the whole thing. So it might look smaller.
Okay.
So that's the reason, just to make the thing look visible.
Just to make it, to have a better idea of the change, I suppose that's what it would do.
Yeah,
okay.
Just graphically. But the thing is, what we're getting at is really just to show you the direction of interest rates. So they're declining right now.
They're declining.
Of course, yeah. And then we are, we're on the revenue side, not on the spending side, but the other side of this is the spending side, and there's the big discussion of what's happening with inflation. So that's another factor that could bite into the size of the portfolio overall if things just get more expensive.
Okay. I could mentally draw that in, of course, but generally where I can, I like to see charts that started at 0 so I can get a better idea of the actual change. Because just looking at the line, it looks like we're almost at 0, which we're
almost
not.
At the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. With that, Commissioner Solomon.
Thanks. Steve, I'll ask this question now since you brought it up. Last Fed meeting, did they weigh in on rates? And it seemed like core inflation was a little bit lower than expected, but did Powell weigh in on what he thought was going to happen going forward?
My recollection is, because there have been a couple, and then I didn't pay too much attention about the last one, but they held firm. That's what I believe happened. And I think there's some hope that, it's very political, obviously,
sure.
Inflation reporting, but there's a really cool term out there, which is called reflation, which is in response to the pandemic that prices are returning to where they should have been. So while they're jumping up, that's one thing. And if people, not unlike Jason's observation of the way the chart looks, if they want to look at a small portion of the curve, they can say we've got a really big inflation problem. On the other hand, some people, economics. On the other hand, there are people that are suggesting that this is potentially very problematic versus those that are saying the economy is doing well, we're restoring pricing, and things could level out. So, right. And the way the Fed reacted, it seems to me they're in a wait and see mode to see if things are going to level out.
Okay, yeah, it seemed like it was a wait and see thing, and I thought that there would be more inflationary pressure, which might spur them to action. But I think the last report was that it was going to be level, remain level, and I wanted, but I didn't see it either, so I was wondering if you had. Okay, thank you.
And going back to the sector allocation, here's just a snapshot of the way in which our investments are allocated. We have just over 26% in LAIF, almost 35% in agencies, 15% in treasuries, 2% in CDs, and about 21% in corporate notes. Here's a chart that goes over the historical book value going back to September 2009. And we can see where we are with regards to our value as of June 21. So this sort of gives us an idea of how the portfolio has been doing over the span of almost 10 years.
So this is a chart I've been pointing out and have been lamenting because we peaked back in 2017. We had a very nice climb with the size of the portfolio, and things turned and we started to fall consistently. However, as we already pointed out, if you go to that June 21 number and you add 15 million to it, it brings it up pretty high. So next time when we show you this chart, it's going to look pretty cool.
And here's just a spreadsheet of the value based on each fiscal year. And if you look at going back to fiscal year 2015, we were right around where we are currently. So that's
the same data as the chart we just saw, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's the same data, just in month format. And then here's the final slide, which discusses graphically shows the purchases and redemptions for the entire fiscal year. So as you can see from this chart, for the first half of the year, we didn't have any purchases, and then we started purchasing. And if you look at the last quarter, we had a total of 3 purchases and 3 redemptions.
You might recall that during COVID, we went through an entire year without making a single purchase. So
Correct.
This is a good sign. Yeah, and then you'll see what we just purchased. How many securities did we actually buy with that 15?
Well, we're in the process of purchasing more, but we already made 3 purchases. So you will see that in the next quarterly report.
Yeah.
And this concludes our presentation for the fourth quarter 2021 fiscal year. Any questions?
Yes, Commissioner Solomon, please.
Thanks, Chair Conroy. Thanks, Nilesh, Steve. 2 quick questions. I noticed that throughout the fiscal, we were in the 20s, as high as 28%, and still at 21% in corporates. Do you see that trend continuing? It's towards the upper range or upper area of our range of our allowable allocation within the portfolio. Do you think we're still going to be heavier into corporates than we have been in the past?
Well, we have limits. That is one area that pays the highest returns. So
Sure.
As long as we can find securities that match our requirements from a risk standpoint, we'll continue to purchase them.
Okay, yeah, we don't want to chase returns, but we also don't want to be left behind. And as far as the securities that we bought, what are we buying in? Are we buying into corporates? Are we buying into treasuries? What were we buying with the 15 million?
We bought treasuries. That was that first purchase.
Okay, thank you. All right, thanks for your report.
Thank you. Nilesh and Steve, I would like to see, I don't know if you guys track it currently or not, but I would really like to see what the fees that we're paying as a percentage for the different types of investments we have, to the extent that it erodes our ultimate return. Do you guys currently track that sort of information?
I don't think we track it on an ongoing basis, but we have it for each purchase. So we can certainly bring a trade ticket and go over it with you. That'd be good to do.
I would really appreciate it if you could do something like that.
So we have an arrangement with Rick, our consultant, and he's to be before you guys once and before the city council once at a minimum each year. And so that might be a good topic for him. We're going to do another policy discussion with you because under a compressed time frame, because we went a little long before we brought it to you last time. And I think when we bring the policy back, we'll bring Rick back, and then we can give you he can give you all the details on how to read a Bloomberg transaction sheet and show you the costs and everything.
That sounds great. As long as we can see what those fees are as a percentage of our investment and nominal dollars, that would be great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Their fee is fixed, but you're talking about the actual cost of the transaction, right?
Well, I'm actually talking about all fees. I'd like to know what we're paying the people that we work with to administer our funds, or I don't know to what degree they provide services.
We pay them $3,500 a month.
I'm sorry. It's $4,500 a quarter.
Oh, a quarter. Sorry,
okay, so
45 a quarter.
4,500 a quarter. That's a flat fee. Are there any variable fees based on the number of transactions or the types of investments?
No, there used to be trade credits, but they're not doing that anymore. The rate actually used to go down. So if we bought anything through their parent company, they rebated the transaction fees and credited against their fee. And so we went quarters and quarters sometimes without paying a thing. So it was a pretty good deal.
Well, okay, it sounds like it's a good deal. I just would like a little visibility there, even if it's just to say, hey, look, we're paying very little in fees. I think it would be helpful, but as opposed to we're paying a lot in fees. So I'd love to see something.
Yeah, just to get it. That's fine. It'd be good. He can explain that. So you're looking at a little bit over $1,000 a month for their services, and right now it's fixed, and then it's the cost per transaction.
And that's all in.
We can show you that.
Based on our portfolio, which is, what did you say the size was currently?
Right now it's 88 million.
So that's, that rounds to almost zero. So
right,
that's good news. I just like to see that. Thanks.
Best deal in town. I've said it before.
Thank you. Okay, and does that conclude? You said that concludes your presentation. Do we have any other? Is there any other questions or comments from our commissioners? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Are there any public comments?
No.
No public comments and no e-comments.
Thank you very much. Okay, in that case, can I get a motion to receive and file item J3?
Motion to receive and file.
Thank you. And a second? Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Okay, seeing a motion in a second, we will do a roll call vote. Let's start with Commissioner Samples, please.
Aye.
Commissioner Solomon.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Wynn.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. Item J3 is now received and filed. I'd like to thank our presenters, Nilesh and Steve. And with that, we will conclude our items for discussion to action. Thank you very much. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen. Next on our agenda is member items and referrals to staff. This is an opportunity for our commissioners. And so we will begin with Commissioner Samples, please.
I just have a comment. Jennifer, welcome aboard. Pleasure seeing you. And other than that, I'm going to be quiet tonight.
Thank you.
He's taking it easy on you, Jennifer. All right, next, Commissioner Johnson, please.
Oh, I think that's a great idea. Jennifer, welcome. Glad to meet you virtually, and
Thank you.
Welcome. And no other referrals or items from me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Wynn, please.
I'm going to echo my fellow commissioners. Welcome, Jennifer. great meeting you virtually, and I have nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wynn. And we'll wrap things up with Commissioner Solomon.
Welcome, Jennifer. It's nice to meet you virtually here. I know for one, I've got my Zoom mullet going. I've got my party, my business up top and a pair of shorts on for the party. Down below, as I'm sure many of us do. One thing I would like to mention and be flexible about the timing of it is something that we discussed several years ago, relates to some of our discussion earlier. Our CIP, according to our code, something is a CIP project at $15,000 in our code, and it's not indexed for inflation. And it was something that we spoke with ASM, Mike Wazansky about with Andy Wengie a few years ago. And it would be something that required a charter amendment. So the council's budgeted for charter amendment reviews. It seemed like something to be simple. Maybe at some point in the fall, we could bring back a discussion on the municipal code segment with the thresholds of our CIP. If everyone's amenable to that.
Oh yeah, we had many discussions about that, and if I recall correctly, we even talked about the idea of, as a part of that whole charter amendment, that we take that line item completely out of the city charter so that it's something that's more manageable and more adjustable by the city as things go forward.
Yeah, it'd be great to have a discussion about it, make it easier on staff, I think, and budgeting for all of our departments going forward to get that in line with, as far as indexed and more in line with today's dollars and cents rather than the historical dollars and cents. And that would be all I would suggest.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Solomon. Yeah, I will just add on to that to say thanks again. It's great to have you be a part of this, part of the city, and by extension, a part of our commission. I think you got a little sense for each of us tonight, and you saw that we've got a lot of varied backgrounds. You're going to meet a couple more commissioners that are also very talented in their fields. We're all very dedicated and passionate about the city we live in, and we're excited to make you a part of that. So thank you so much. That's all I have for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone here, and I'm really excited to be working with you all. I do want to note, it says in the agenda that our next meeting is the 9th of September. It's actually going to be the 16th.
Okay. Let me put that down. Okay. All right. With no other items, no other hands up, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. And can I get a second?
Second.
All right. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
The dog agrees.
I know.
To the last minute.
We'll see you on